Welcome back to the Religion Unplugged podcast. This is Matthew Peterson. Today I'll be talking with Noah Van Sciver about his graphic novel, Joseph Smith and The Mormons. Noah is an award-winning cartoonist who has written and illustrated numerous graphic novels and comic strips. Noah, thanks so much for talking with us today.
My pleasure.
So I've read a lot of graphic novels, big fan of comics, and this is probably the single thickest, like, one-off graphic novel I've ever read. It
Hmm.
shows a lot of research, incredible amount of art that you did, so many panels, and I know that you grew up LDS and you no longer practice, and it's an incredible amount of dedication to put into something that isn't necessarily coming from a place of worship or reverence.
Hmm.
And so I'm wondering, why was it important to give such an exhaustive and beautifully told portrayal of Joseph Smith's life in this way?
Well, I did it because I wanted to know if it was worth um, reverence. If it was
Mm,
worth worship or anything. I grew up in that church, but I'm not a member anymore. My whole story is that my parents divorced in the '90s, and my mother left the church. And since I was young enough to go with her, she separated me from the church.
mm,
So when I was growing up, I always kind of had this itch about it, like if was that like the right move for me? Because the other half of my family was still going to church and still religious, so I wasn't sure. I felt like it was a decision that I didn't make, my mother made for me.
mm.
And so doing this project was like, I'm an adult now. Let me dive into what that whole faith was about that I grew up in and see if I could fit into it, see if it's something that resonates with me and that I need to get back to. So that was the purpose of doing it. So I didn't
Mm.
when I did this graphic novel, I was like, this is not me trashing the religion, and this is not me praising it. This is me looking at it as objectively as I possibly can and deciding whether or not um, there's truth there. So
Yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
think that's a barrier for a lot of people who read it because they just want like Mormon bashing. You know what I mean? I don't. I just didn't want to deliver that. That wasn't the
right,
purpose of doing the book.
right,
So it
right.
confuses people.
And have you had any from the other side who, like, expect to get this, like, stunning, blemishless telling of Joseph Smith's life, or is it pretty much only people who want to bash Joseph?
I got a lot of people who were okay. So the people who like the book mostly that I've heard from are women that are in the church, liked it a
Mm,
lot. I got a lot of messages, surprisingly, from young women who are in the church who liked the portrayal of Joseph Smith's wife
hmm.
because it wasn't something that they had seen being focused on very much.
Yeah.
And especially like dealing with like whatever her emotional states would be as these things are going on. So I heard a lot from them, and I heard from people that were in the church that were upset with me because I illustrated things that they didn't feel comfortable being out there for like a secular audience. For
Mm,
example, how exactly the Book of Mormon came about, like how it was written, how it was put together and stuff. With when you hear about it, the paintings from the church are always like Joseph looking at a big stack of golden plates, and then like his friend writing down what he's reading. But what actually happened is that he put his head in a hat and all that stuff, and just spoke out loud, and his friend was on the other side of a curtain
mm,
writing it down. So I think when you just lay that out there as barely as I did in the book, I think a lot of people, even if they don't want to admit it, were embarrassed by that.
mm.
And they were embarrassed also by the infidelities that Joseph Smith, that's the famous whole thing, the whole plural marriage thing, I think is an embarrassment to a lot of people in the church.
Right.
And they don't want to have to explain that to a secular audience. So I think, so I got a lot of heat for that and a few other things that I can't really remember. I think just telling the story straightforward without making it seem like this is some wholly inspired thing that happened in this country was kind of upsetting for some people.
Yeah, yeah,
But then
certainly.
again, I got a lot of. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, no.
I also got a lot of um, people happy that that it wasn't just like me bashing them. It wasn't like that
Right.
episode of South Park is what everybody expected me to do, because the work that I've done before this, a lot of it is kind of like satire, and it can be kind of cruel humor and stuff like that. Just like in the tradition of cartoonists, that's a lot of my work is like that. So I think they were expecting that, and I think that they were surprised that I didn't do that. So
Yeah. Yeah, and you've done this kind of historic graphic novel before. You did the
mhm.
Melancholic Young Lincoln, I think is what it's called, and then
Mm.
the Johnny Appleseed one. Is this something that you want to continue doing? This kind of like historical graphic novel stuff?
Um, yeah, well, I'm interested in American history, so I
Yeah.
like taking on those stories. The Lincoln one is called the Hypo, the Melancholic Young
Ah,
Lincoln. That was the first book I did too, and that was really tough to figure. That was like me figuring out how to do a graphic novel.
yeah. Wow. Wow.
Um, but yeah, I'd like to keep doing them. I just have to find subjects that are like inspiring, that because it
Totally.
takes so long to do these things. It always takes way longer than you think it's going to be. It's
Yeah.
always way harder than you think it's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
you just
saw
have
I
to,
saw something like you posted like some drawing from the Joseph Smith thing like in 2011 or something. Is that
uh-huh.
right?
Yeah, I've
Like
been
how,
working on it for a long time, and I just couldn't. I kept running into the wall where I had to realize like, oh, I'm not good enough to take this on yet. Like, and
yeah.
then
Right.
and then there had to be a breakthrough, and I think the breakthrough was probably the Johnny Appleseed book, because
Mm,
I didn't write that book. I just illustrated it, but because it had like a really tight deadline and it was all historic stuff, I learned a lot about like what things would look like from the early 1800s and things like that. And I kind of gained a lot of confidence. So by the end of that project, I was like, I think I might be able to take this on now, I just happened to be in Vermont at the time, not far from Joseph Smith's birthplace.
mm.
So I was like, okay, well, I'm here. Like I could start my research right now. Like I could do this now. And so that's how it's like they always say, like God always puts you like exactly where he wants you to be. And
Mm.
I felt like that. Like I'm I'm here in this exact spot with this project that I've had in mind for a long time.
Yeah.
I think now I'm supposed to do this. So yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I'm also interested, like, in the back of your book, you kind of have this long, like, well, not long, but you have this artist statement for like what you're trying to do. And you mention that just reading about Joseph Smith and learning about him wasn't enough. You say you had to be Joseph Smith in some way, and so you did it through
Mhm.
this graphic novel. And it reminds me a lot of like when people talk about method acting or like
Right. Yeah.
going full in, like they're living like the character. And that a lot of times people talk about how if they were playing somebody who was kind of problematic in some way, it really gets to them and it really puts them in some dark or uncomfortable places. Did you find that being true for you when you were exploring Joseph Smith's life?
Yeah, I couldn't escape it. Like it
Hmm.
became everything. Like everything that I was reading had to do with him or the church's history. Like I was having to like just the minutia of his life. Like, what would okay, so they arrive at a swampland and they're going to build it up into a little town. How do you do that exactly? Like, because I have to
Yeah.
draw pages of that happening. So it's like little things like that. So I was just so like into that world that it was like my dreams were just all me being there doing like laying bricks or something, it's like but you have to, because when you're working on a graphic novel, it's like you're making a movie on paper, but
Mm,
you have every job. Like, you're the director, you're the actors and everything, you're the writer and stuff. So like, yeah, you really have to figure out why characters would act the way that they act, and like why situations turned out the way they turned out and things like that. You have to like really become them.
mm.
And yeah, so I had to become Joseph Smith, and like, why would it get to that point? I have my
Yeah.
theories about it. I mean, I just, it's like, it just seems like power, like that's what happens to people. You get power, and it's like, what can you get away with? I think
Yeah.
that's controversial to say, but it seems like the only kind of more human reason for why things wound up the way that they wound up.
Totally.
How much more can you have?
Yeah. Yeah. I no, totally. I think like reading it, it was kind of like I felt like there was a very simple conclusion you could come to about Joseph Smith, which is like
Mm-hmm.
he was taught to grift at a young age. He thought up
Mm-hmm.
the ultimate grift and he used it the rest of his life to accumulate power. And then there's like the more complex reading, maybe, which would say like it seems like he went in and out a lot with like believing that he was both going to bring himself power and acclaim, but also like maybe he could kind of create this idyllic society. Like, yeah, it was for kind of some of his own ends, but he had maybe some kind of noble goals in there.
Mhm.
I kind of think just reading it, at least in the my reading of what you portrayed, because that's really all I'm familiar with Joseph Smith. Is there was it seemed to me that he was a tortured person, that there was always kind of one hand in him, that because he started to grift not for, with his father, he started to grift not for himself but for his family, for the
Yeah,
provision. So there
right.
seems like there is kind of this slight bone in him that is kind of like, maybe I can help others too. I don't know.
Yeah, well, he did. I mean, you can't take that away, but also it's
Sure.
like, why wouldn't he develop like grand feelings about himself and what he's doing? Because
Right.
look what he was accomplishing. Like, and it really was like insane, like how many things were coming together for him
Right.
and how easily he was able to do. I mean, there was a lot of around that time too, that era, there were a lot of people who came about and said they were like prophets or whatever, and tried to start their own
Mm.
religions. And every one of them just fizzled out or was like self-destructed or something, and his just kept going and growing. And even though everybody was trying to kill him and chasing his followers all
Yeah.
over the country and stuff, like they were always able to like start over and keep growing. I mean,
Hmm.
you would think there's something divine happening here to keep us, you know, moving forward.
Yeah.
So it's understandable that he would develop feelings about like maybe I am like a real prophet, maybe I am everything that people are saying that I am and stuff. And it seems
Yeah.
natural.
And when did you become like convinced that, when in the process did you kind of come to the conclusion that this truly was not a person that deserved any reverence from you?
It seems so strong to say that way.
Sorry, yeah, I don't mean to
I don't
interject.
know. I think it seems like when I got to the end and everything seemed summed up to me. Um, well, okay, so like in the beginning, I started to have like seeds of doubt in my head because it was like they were wondering about like the history of the indigenous people, where they came from, why they were here.
Mm.
And to me, I felt like, oh, he trying to write a book about like the history of these people and where they came from, and then that's just like another way of making money, like getting this book published, and then maybe possibly like he meets Martin Harris, who's like religious fanatic,
Mm.
but Martin has the money to publish this book that he's working on that he wants to do, but Martin is kind of incorporating this. He's bringing religion, he's bringing faith into it. So maybe like, oh, okay, I'll add the faith element to this story about the indigenous people, um, just to get this thing out there. Like, and I felt like, is this like a snowballing effect
Yeah, right,
where,
right.
and so there were seeds in my head in the very beginning when I was learning about like the history of the Book of Mormon that I was like, I don't know if I buy this.
Mm.
And then by the end of it, I just felt like, yeah, I don't think this is real. Like, I don't have faith in what the Book of Mormon says about like, I don't believe that, Jesus came to America and
Mm.
all that stuff. Like, I feel like it was so early in the country's history that people were coming here from wherever they're coming from, but they were bringing their faith with them. And this is a new land that's unknown. It's full of strange people to them. How does it relate to their faith?
Mm.
And I think there was a lot of opportunity for people to take advantage of that like for longing to these Christians of like, here's how Jesus fits into this land. The Garden of Eden was like in Missouri and all these things.
Mm.
It felt like kind of convenient to me.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, I don't know. I just by the end of it, I just felt like this is not this just doesn't feel real to me. It doesn't feel
Mm.
correct. But at the same time, like I hate to even say all those things because I don't have any hatred in my heart for LDS community. Like I don't, I still have a lot of family members who are in the church. Um, my dad won't talk to me because of this book.
Wow.
And like so it like affected them, and I feel guilty about that. But yeah, I just for me it was just too many, there's too many little parts of it that I would have to get over in order to like believe in it, and I just don't think I ever can, you know.
And you don't have to talk about this on a podcast. We can cut this out if you don't want to. But does your dad have specific tenets of the book that are like truly like the things he can't overlook?
Well, I think a lot of it, well, and you don't have to cut this out, it's fine. But like I think a lot of it was just the stuff I spoke about earlier that people that are faithful had a problem with. I think a lot of it was portrayal of bad things that Joseph did that they believe are lies, that they
Mm-hmm.
don't believe happened. Um, that I illustrated from like firsthand accounts or whatever, from like actual documents, or like illustrating like, Martin Harris and, like the witnesses of the golden plates and stuff like that, like them later on saying like, well, I didn't necessarily see the angel. I saw it with my spiritual eye or whatever, kind of including that information and stuff. I think it was unforgivable because I think for my dad, he was really proud, like, oh, maybe this is my son coming back to the faith, and he's using his art in this way of like, you know, um, like spreading the message or something, like this is a really
Yeah.
good thing. And I think when he saw it, he was really disappointed, and he was disappointed that the anti-LDS community kind of embraced the book and
Mm.
promoted it. And I think that was kind of the final straw. I felt like it was him being stabbed in the back or something. And I mean, I didn't intend any of that stuff. Like I told you, I was just trying to tell the story straightforward for myself to see if I was going to come back. But I just, yeah, that's just how
No,
it goes.
totally. Totally. Yeah. I'm sure that was I don't know. I think it's always admirable when somebody tries to make art that is processing things about their childhood and that
Hmm.
risks relationships. So I have a lot of respect for that.
I
Um,
think about this book as like
yeah.
I've done a lot of autobiographical comics. That's like mainly what I do. And I
Right.
think of this as just another autobiographical book. I mean,
Hmm.
I have a memoir called like One Dirty Tree, which is about my upbringing, my childhood in the church and stuff. And I just think of this as like a sequel to that book, like
Yeah.
this is what that was all about.
Yeah. And so do
So
you think you'll keep writing about religion?
I'd like to. I don't think there's a big readership for it within like alternative comics. I think that
Yeah.
anything kind of faith-based or about spirituality is like kryptonite to them. Like
Hmm.
they don't want anything to do with it. So it's difficult. I don't
Yeah.
know who would publish it, and I don't know. It's tricky because I also think that the people that were into that stuff are not going to pick up a graphic novel about it. So I don't
Hmm.
really know if there's even an
Sure.
audience. But I'd love to keep doing more and more stuff because it's an education for me.
Right.
But
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I do want to ask because I'm just curious. I think the actual construction of the physical book is like very fun, but like that it kind of looks like a holy book, kind of being like
mhm,
leather and having the gilded pages. And
yeah,
was that your idea, or was that like the editor's?
that was the publisher's idea. Like
Okay,
they had that like when we signed the contract to do the book like a long time ago. That was part of it. They're like, this is how it's going to look. This is the size it's going to be. So we always knew that's how it was going to look. So
that's awesome. Yeah,
yeah,
I just thought that was fun.
thanks.
I'm curious how now, as somebody who your childhood was very much religion was very much incorporated into your childhood. You've now come to this point where you're like, I don't really think it was you don't believe it was true. How then are you raising your own children? You mentioned you just had a baby and you have a toddler. What's your plan kind of philosophically, religiously to
I
show
don't have,
them?
my wife is not religious at all. She's not
Mm.
Christian or anything. I don't, so we just raise them. My son goes to a daycare and a church, so I'm sure he gets um, some stuff, but like, yeah, no, I mean, they're just little babies at this point. So I don't
Yeah,
have
right.
any plan there or anything. So,
Yeah. Do you have things that kind of somewhere where you've landed? Like, do you ascribe to any kind of religion, philosophy, or?
I don't know. Like I read the Bible. I'm very interested in the Bible.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't, if I think, as they say, like Jesus would spit me out of his mouth. I don't think I would be accepted. I don't think I wouldn't call myself a Christian because I wouldn't have the gall to do something like that. But I'm very interested in it.
Hmm.
I'm very interested in faith and learning more about that kind of thing.
Yeah,
But I can't claim that I'm any religion or anything.
sure. So,
Maybe
but
someday, I don't know.
Jesus Christ might be the next autobiographical graphic novel.
Yeah, well, there's some really good, have you seen that like the Action Bible? You see
I
that all
have
the
seen that.
time?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
have seen that.
I think that's probably the ultimate one. I don't think anybody's going to top that one.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Do you think there's kind of a you said there's not maybe like a huge readership for it, but
mhm.
do you wish more people would do religious graphic novels?
Selfishly, yeah, for my own sake, I
Yeah.
think, but it's so taboo
Yeah.
in comics and in the arts, so there'd have to be some kind of revolution that would happen to make that stuff sellable or make people interested in it. It's religion is really not I don't know, man. I don't know how it's going, but it doesn't seem like
Yeah.
it's going very well.
Yeah,
I mean, you
man.
tell me, right? You're a Christian. Tell me, like, what do you think? What do you think? Do you think it's growing or shrinking?
Uh I think it depends where you look, man. I think different countries are doing different things. The scary thing is like we're doing a lot of coverage right now. Our Religion Unplugged is doing so much coverage on the idea of religious nationalism across the globe.
Yeah.
So we're writing a lot about Christian nationalism right now with the Trump election and everything, and then we're writing a lot about the BJP Hindu nationalism in India.
Hmm.
And I think that if religion keeps being equated with politics,
Hmm.
which is a finite thing and a dead end. We're trying to equate something eternal and
Hmm.
endless and elevated with something finite and a dead end. If that keeps happening, where we keep trying to shove those into each other, fitting a square peg into a round hole, it's never going to work, and that's going to turn a lot of people away from churches of all kinds. So I'm very nervous about the direction everything's going.
Yeah.
And I think what the comic book um, is accessible information.
Hmm.
And I've always loved so I grew up reading a lot of comics, and like when I was probably around middle school, family would buy me like um, historical graphic novels and stuff like that. Way more accessible because it was pictures and the writing was summaries and things like that. And so I would learn, about Abraham Lincoln or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And if we could if we can just make religion less this big scary thing that's going to destroy everybody because we're trying to equate it with power and government like we're trying to do everywhere, and we make it less like that and more like um, really great stories with really great ideas about how you should live your life and how you can love others well,
Hmm.
that's what we need to do. And I think comics, graphic novels are great at doing that, are great at giving you accessible information as well as being, entertaining and fun.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I think that's the problem is that Christianity is so attached to like a certain party. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
people think of Christianity, they think of like Republicans or something, and
Sure.
that's if you're talking about the arts is very left leaning,
Right.
almost entirely. So I think there's no way they're ever gonna be interested in something that just feels like oppression or something, which is like what people think of the conservative party as being
Yeah.
all about and stuff. So
Right.
yeah,
And honestly, like the great Christian art is old. It's like we're not
yeah,
making new stuff that's good. We're making new stuff that's really bad and really tacky and really, I don't know, man. Just tacky really is the word I feel like with a lot of Christian music, a lot of Christian
mm,
visuals that I see. Um, even like uh even like the little bit that is kind of like Christian comics. Some of it's kind of cool, and then some of it's like, dude, it's
you
just
think
kind of
of
rough.
you think of like Jack Chick tracks, those like those little
Oh,
comics they
sure,
leave on bus station, like in bus
sure,
stations, like it's just like you're
yeah,
going to
right,
hell.
right, exactly,
That's what people think of it.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
there's
there would need
not,
to
yeah,
be some like amazing Christian cartoonist that came up, but like I don't know. I don't, not for like another 100 years. I just can't imagine. It's
Yeah,
just everything's just too tied to
yeah,
politics, which is really a shame. Like everything just got really political really quickly.
it
So I
did.
think people's heads are spinning
It
from
did.
that,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, it's hard. But I stuff like what you're doing is makes me very hopeful. As a journalist, I really appreciate like the level of research that went into it,
Mm.
and just trying to make information accessible is the goal.
Yeah.
um and so I think that's really beautiful, and I would like to know, like, what do you think is um the advantage of graphic novels for storytelling?
Well, I think it's just what you said, like it's accessible.
Yeah,
Um, uh, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know any other word. I think it
yeah,
really is
yeah,
just like the best way to like deliver information and get people to really get it, you know? And
right.
yeah, you'll reach like a wider audience than if I had just published a book about Joseph Smith, which probably wouldn't reach as many people,
Yeah, totally,
young people anyway. But yeah.
totally. Yeah. All right, man. Well, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. I guess I'll just ask one more thing, is just what can we expect from Noah Van Sciver next? What are you working on?
So I did a book called Maple Terrace, which is
Cool.
another childhood story that's out from Uncivilized Books. Just a little graphic novel that's pretty funny. People seem to like it a lot, and that's that. And I'm working on a children's book about Calamity Jane. So that's what's on my desk right now.
Cool.
More
Awesome.
American history, you know.
Yeah, awesome,
Yeah,
dude. All
yeah,
right. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great conversation. Very fun for me. I've been a cartoonist fan for a long time. So, and I've just discovered you, and now I want to read like everything you've written because I really like your style.
yeah. You have
So I
to
appreciate it. Okay. All right.
read
Legally.
everything.
Okay. Will do. Will do.
All right, buddy. It
All
was
right.
nice talking to you, man.
Same to you.
Bye.
Bye.